Hi everyone. So this is just a short video talking you through or giving you a bit of a walkthrough of your trial exams coming up shortly once you return to school after the Easter break. So I've done this in terms of giving you the dates but talking you through what each paper is going to look like. In addition to this video, there is also a separate document which will talk you through the different topics that will be tested across paper 1, which is micro, and paper 2, which is macro. So please make sure that you watch all of this video, but also take a look and cross-reference your revision against the topic lists that have been given for both micro and macro. We'll start off by simply just looking at the difference between paper 1 and paper 2. In your trial exam timetable, economics will appear twice. The first time you will see it, that represents paper 1, and paper 1 is all microeconomics. That will be the first paper that you sit. That's the way it operates in the real exams. You will always do microeconomics first. That's paper 1, and you will sit that in the morning of Thursday, the 27th of April. That paper will be 1 hour and 30 minutes in length. Paper 2 then will be sat on Tuesday, the 2nd of May, and that will be your macroeconomics paper. So in paper 1, all the questions are purely microeconomics. There is no macro being tested in paper 1, and in paper 2, it is purely macroeconomics. There is no microeconomics tested in paper 2. Please take note of these two dates. What I would say is that obviously with micro coming first, you'll probably want to prepare for that first, but make sure you do balance your revision between both micro and macroeconomics. When you get your trial exam grade, the grade is made up of both papers. So we will take the raw score for the micro paper and take the raw score for the macro paper, and then you will be given a percentage overall which includes both papers, and you will get one grade which includes performance in both micro and macroeconomics. So having looked at the dates, what I'm going to talk you through now is something that's very simple. Don't get too caught up in this, but this is the structure of each of the papers. Now, what I've tried to do here, I have split the paper into 4 sections. And when you open up your paper, each section is titled at the top of it. So section A will be 15 multiple choice questions. So as soon as you turn over the paper, the first thing you will read will be section A, multiple choice questions. So it talks you through each of the sections. As well signposted throughout your paper. So section A is 15 multiple choice questions, and each question carries with it 1 mark each. Now, all of those questions are taken from a range of the specifications. So for example, when I put together the micro and macro papers, I looked at all the topics that have been that we've taught since September, and I've tried to give you 1 question per each of the headlines or each of the titles. Okay, so for example, if I think of micro, expect at least 1 ppf, expect at least 1 question on calculating elasticities, expect at least 1 question on externalities, for example. So with both micro and macro, it will test a range of those different topics. We normally say that with 1 mark, with 1 question for multiple choice, it should take you roughly 1 minute per mark. So I've allocated about 15 minutes for that. Some of you I know will finish multiple choice sooner than others, and I wouldn't say I haven't deliberately made the multiple choice tricky, but there will be easy questions in there. There will be slightly more challenging questions in there as well. In section B, now section B is probably the longest of the different sections because it's the collection, it's a section where there's a greater number of questions that are being asked. And this is what we call data response 1. So I've given you 2 data responses in your papers. Data response 1 purely looks at a short case study. Now, my understanding from what I remember is that there are 2 extracts. The first extract is always numerical data. It could be in a table, it could be in a graph, it could be whatever. You're asked to interpret that data and use it within your answers. So it's based upon a case study. The first 3 mark question will be a definition question. Now, normally what happens is that we will select a keyword from the extracts and we will ask you to define that term. The 4-mark question is a calculation question. So using the data, make a calculation. And all you simply need to do for that one is show your working out and give the right answer. Please be mindful of things like the examiner might ask you to give it to 2 decimal places, for example. It might be a percentage change. It might be an elasticity. It might be an index number. So please take use of the unit that you're being asked as well. If it's things like revenue, remember to give the pound sign or the value of money or currency that you're looking at. The next 4-mark question, and this is both for micro and macro, the next 4-mark question will be a diagram question. So you'll be given a small section of graph paper. The axes will be drawn for you, and you'll be asked to draw a diagram of some sort. When drawing it, make sure look at your axes. What are they properly labeled as? Look at labeling the correct curves. Please be very careful with getting confused between micro and macro. You will not be expected to draw AD and AS diagrams in your micro exam. The 9-mark question, you've done 9-mark questions before. It's simply an explain question. From what I can remember putting the papers together, the 9-mark questions aren't anything too difficult. They will expect you to know your stuff. Think about, folks, when we're looking at micro, things to get you those top marks: elasticities, shortages and surpluses, the quoting the case study as much as you can, and looking at it thinking, is it just one, does it require 2 points? Don't be drawing the same diagram twice. That altogether will total 20 marks. I'm saying between reading the case study, answering the questions, give yourself about 30 minutes with this one. Section C is another data response question. Now, again, I've given you 2 extracts, just the same as data response 1, but in this one I've only given you a 4-mark quantitative skills, so that's another calculation question, and I've given you another 9-mark question, and I'm saying roughly spend about 13 minutes on this. So all in all, you've got 2 9-mark questions to answer across your whole paper. In section D, this is a 15-mark question, and you should spend roughly about 20 minutes on this question. Now, a 15-mark question is simply just an explain question. It's basically a longer version of a 9-mark question. You just need to spend 20 minutes rather than 12 minutes answering it. When you think about, well, how can I do that? The nature of the question will naturally open itself up to you being able to talk more about something. Now, with section B, the 15-mark question, there is no case study. There's a very, very small extract above that gives you a bit of a flavor of what you could possibly look at and what you could possibly look into, but it's not a very complex or difficult question. I've had a look at both the micro and macro 15-mark questions. We haven't set you up to fail. They very much so are focused in one area of the specification, and you literally just need to know your stuff about that one particular area and explain that in depth. There is no evaluation needed for that 15-mark question. With a 15-mark question, if you're looking at it and thinking, yeah, I know exactly what to write, it should take you roughly about 20 minutes. So there's your 4 sections: section A, section B, section C, and section D. I've given you timings and markings for each. I cannot emphasize this enough, is that the structure of the paper 1, which is the micro paper, will exactly mirror the macro paper. So what paper 1 looks like will be exactly the same as what paper 2 will look like. So the exact timings, the exact number of questions, the marks awarded for each question will be exactly the same for micro and macro. Just a quick overview on the 15-mark question and the level success criteria. So when you're answering a 15-mark question, what should this look like? What do you need to do in order to get a full 15 marks in this particular area? It's very straightforward. I haven't made this very difficult. I want you to be able to fully know what you should include within these 15-mark questions. So they are all explain or analyze questions. They require depth. They require logical chains. Okay. Some of them will require 2 points. Some of them could require up to about 3 points maximum. We wouldn't say any more than 3. So sometimes if you get a question that simply says, explain the, so for example, explain the sources of monopoly power. Well, you could write more than 2, you could write more than 3, but we would say to keep the depth and logical chains there, a maximum of 3 points. So that would basically be give 3 reasons as to how a firm can experience monopoly power, for example. I could say things like explain 3 consequences of rising levels of unemployment, for example, for a macroeconomic essay. Well, there's various different reasons that could cause rising levels of unemployment. You would talk about 3 of them and talk about 3 in depth, okay? Technique, definitions. Always have a look at, always define the terms in the question. So in the example I gave you, explain the sources of monopoly power, the first thing you would do would be to define monopoly power. Think about diagrams. If, for example, if it's micro, and what I would say for this trial exam, micro will be looking at the 50-mark question, will look at market failures. So within that, you would be looking at things like externalities diagrams. So have a think about what diagrams would be relevant. It is not a case of draw as many diagrams as you can. It is a genuine case of draw the diagram that is most relevant to answering the question. If you do draw a diagram, make sure it's large enough, make sure that we can see it. And I say that across all questions that you will draw diagrams in. Make sure they're relevant, make sure they're accurate. Please refer to the diagram. So if it's externalities, talk about the divergence, talk about what's greater than or less than, talk about your welfare loss, for example. Give lots of examples, apply, use the context, use it to your advantage, okay? Get as much from that context as you possibly can. Analyze, talk about the depth. How well do you know your economic theory? Whenever we're marking your answers, we're looking for depth, we're looking for knowledge, we're looking for how well can you explain this theory. The examiners, as examiners, we're always told that at the end of marking the question, how well do you know the student has been taught this, and how well has the student sat down and learned this? It may require 2 or 3 points. It depends upon the depth that's required, okay? So I can tell you now, you can write 2 really detailed points for your 15-mark questions in your exams, but you could and probably should write about up to 3 points for your trial exams. Maximum of 20 minutes if you're trying to put a timing on that. Okay, so like I said, just 3 slides, very short video. All the very best with your revision and all the very best with your trial exams. Any questions, just simply let me know.